that I'm going to need to put in the time, and I don't want to rush and just kind of get through. Because to your point, there might be some things that we learn during our journey where it might not really benefit you that much in your career, but then there's some things that it's a really good foundation that you might have not been able to learn previously, and that's kind of what I tried to use.
So in between all the personal and the professional commitments, you have to squeeze time out. And then I come along and tell you that, enjoy the ride, immerse in the learning experience. Ask yourself, big question, why grounding is different from bonding. Even if you're super experienced, it is very refreshing to understand some of these concepts from ground up. And obviously, if you're starting from scratch, just learning about power systems and think that it is imperative for you to actually take this approach. Otherwise, you don't have any baseline to sort of fall back on, right?
Pick up stuff every time you watch it.
Right.
And to your point, the conceptual problems on the PE exam, there's no layout of what they can ask. There's so much they can ask. So you really need to be able to understand from the ground up.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, how's it going, Wasim?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
So, Michael, congratulations on passing your PE Power exam in the first attempt. And, start this interview. I'd appreciate if you could give us a brief overview of your academic background, when you graduated, when you got on to this journey of PE licensing, passed your FE, and so on.
Yeah, so I'm from Texas. I went to Texas A&M University and graduated in 2016 with a electronic systems engineering background. And I went into IT consulting actually for 1 year. I realized it wasn't really for me, and got into the MEP space. And I've been doing MEP design for 7 years now. And that is kind of where my journey started to get my FE first, and then now my PE.
So you graduated in 2016, you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And when did you take your FE exam?
So I took my FE a year into my MEP career, so in 2018.
In 2018. And for your FE electrical preparation, you mentioned that you had primarily used my study guide and maybe the practice exam, right? The books?
Yeah, there was also a green book that I used, but I primarily
Okay.
used your practice problem study guide book.
Okay. So after passing your FE in 2017, 2018, and working in MEP, you started your PE Power exam preparation journey late last year in October, November, right? 2023.
Yes.
What was the reason for the delay? About
So
three,
for
four
the
years of delay?
delay, while my university is ABET accredited, my actual major required an 8 year career path rather than the 4 years to get my licensure. So there wasn't really a rush. As soon as I got into MEP, I knew this is like where I wanted to be. I enjoyed the work.
Right.
And there wasn't really, just with everything going on in my life, I didn't feel pressured to take it right away. I kind of looking back, kind of maybe wish I did take it a little bit
Yeah.
earlier, because life just gets more busy and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I delayed a little bit, but I knew once I took it, my FE, I knew what I wanted to do, which was take your course once I was ready to do it, and the timing was last year. So
Right.
that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, there's a time for everything, right? And
Exactly.
typically with the P Power exam preparation, I tell my students the sooner the better. But if you have reasons, obviously you have to manage other aspects of your life as well, right? So if you can walk me through your P Power exam preparation journey, what approach did you take? How you utilized my on-demand course, the live training, the study guide, how you paced yourself, what was your schedule like, your routine like, any major challenges you encountered?
Yeah, so pretty early on, as I was doing my research, I knew I wanted to go with your course, and I saw that you offered like the on demand with the live training and everything, and I believe it was a 3 month schedule. And I looked at some of the content once I purchased the program of how it was structured, and I realized it was pretty aggressive schedule. The work that I do, especially at work, being in like a lead engineering role for some large projects, I knew it was going to be very tough for me to hold that aggressive schedule while balancing work and then outside life. So I pretty early on made a plan of, rather than doing, the two live lectures that we did a week, I split it up to where I would do one. Because one of the ways that I like to study is I like to make sure before I go on, I really understand what I do for that week. So rather than, just trying to chug through it and just, drink from a fire hose, as they say, I really wanted to understand the concept. So through every section that we did, I made sure to do all the homework problems, all the quizzes, all the, study guide problems, and then try your homework problems by myself, and then watch the recording on the weekend and pause the video to just do the problems that you walk through in class and see if I got to the same solution. So it was definitely like a much slower pace for me, but I wanted to make sure like once I got off a topic, I had a good foundation. I knew I would have to come back to it eventually because my rate at which I did the course was 4.5 months maybe rather than the 3 months. So the first week, it's hard to remember exactly everything you did 4 months later, but I knew since I had a solid foundation when I went slowly, I would be able to pick it up again rather quickly. So I think for me, it was just mainly like you gave us the tools, and then it was just for me, it wasn't one size fits all solution. And I think that's the key is everyone just kind of needs to figure out what approach works for them. You give us what we need to succeed, and then you just got to tailor the program to exactly what you can do. So I mean, it was really nice to have the community circle also start up because I would ask questions on that since I wasn't involved in the class at the same pace. But then a lot of your students too were really helpful, and they would go back in and answer the questions, and if they couldn't, you would come back in as well. So I didn't feel like I was ever isolated because I knew there was like the community, and I could also reach out to you. So I think pretty much we had everything we needed to succeed. Just had to put in the work and grind.
Yeah. No, that's really impressive, Michael. And one of the things I'd like to point out is that students who actually take the approach of using these exams as an opportunity to learn the concepts inside out, they enjoy the exam preparation. It becomes much more fun, much more easy for them to actually navigate through the entire exam specification, right? It's literally at the end of the day a mindset game, right? So from the get-go, you were committed to learning, right? You wanted to
Right.
make sure that you wanted to understand the concepts rather than just, plug and chug and just bulldoze through all the knowledge areas. You wanted to actually use this as an opportunity to learn. And that's why you were willing to put in a little bit of extra effort. You were okay with your timeline, with your runway being a little bit longer than typical. And you were not just trying to get over with it, right? I understand that the primary goal when you take on this project is to pass the exam. But in my honest opinion, especially with the P power, I'm not sure if I can say the same for the FE electrical exam, because in FE electrical exam, 80 to 90% of the stuff, regardless of which specialization within electrical engineering you are operating in, whether you are in power systems, whether you are an electronics guy, a control systems engineer, an instrumentation engineer, at best, you are going to be able to refresh only 10 to 20, maximum 30% of the knowledge related to your specific field if you are relying on FE electrical as a refresher. But when it
Right.
comes to P power, like you work in MEP, a lot of my students work in MEP, a lot of my students work in utilities, a lot of students work in renewable, so all over the place, right? Um, but the way that the curriculum, the specification is designed for the P power exam, it actually helps you to brush up on all the fundamentals. And when you take that approach, it becomes a lot more easier and a lot more enjoyable to go through that journey. Anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I was going to say so absolutely. And I mean, in school, I mainly studied, electronics. So I had a very, low voltage type of stuff, circuit analysis. So there was a lot of concepts that, being an MEP, I do a lot of like building design. So things like relay protection, distribution, that's not something that's really in my wheelhouse. So when I read through the specification right away, I knew that there was going to be concepts that are, you know, relatively foreign to me that I'm going to need to put in the time, and I don't want to rush and just kind of get through. Because to your point, there might be some things that, you know, we learn during our journey where it might not really benefit you that much in your career, but then there's some things that, you know, it's a really good foundation that you might have not been able to learn previously. And that's kind of what I tried to use. There was, you know, grounding, bonding, there's simple concepts in there that, you know, you reinforce and you're like, oh, okay, that's why we do things the way we do it. And then, you know, at work, you don't ever really have time to just, you know, sit and read the code book or dive through that well, because, you know, you have a budget, you have everything, you find the answer, and then you go on to the next thing, but you're not really like, you know, jumping around and playing around in there. So I think the people that are the most successful really kind of try to leverage the exam for themselves, not just to get it, you know, check the box and get the
Yeah.
certificate, which is
Yeah.
important too, but
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's a difficult sell, to be honest. To push this idea through, it's difficult in the sense that we all lead fairly busy lives, right? If you're working full time, 40, 50, sometimes 60, even up to 70 hours, you'll have to commit to work, right? So that takes majority of your time. If you have family, if you have young kids, especially, it becomes even more difficult, right? So in between all the personal and the professional commitments, you have to squeeze time out. And then I come along and tell you that, enjoy the ride,
right.
immerse in the learning experience. Ask yourself, big question, why grounding is different from bonding, right? And you might be thinking that I just want to get over with this exam, right? I just want to see that green passing result on my NCS dashboard. That's about it. I don't want to get into these philosophical discussions, right? But the fact of the matter is that if you really want to be comfortable in your skin, okay, as a good power systems engineer, as an electrical engineer, then at some point you'll have to confront these subtle, abstract, and convoluted concepts. And the more you put them off, the more you'll be unsure of yourself, and the less confident people around are going to be about you. And what I realize is that the engineers, my mentors, over the years, that I've had experience working with. Some of these guys had 30, 40 years of experience under the belt. They were never hesitant in learning anything new, even
Mhm.
having 30 plus years of experience. So one of my mentors, he was a PhD, and I used to think that he had seen everything, done everything with 30 plus years of experience in the industry. And I got an opportunity to work very closely with him on a project. And it was a very specialized type of bus design for a generator. I don't remember exactly what the rating of the generator was, but it was basically a power plant. And if I'm not mistaken, it was in tens of megawatts. So he had never encountered such a high capacity, and it was medium voltage configuration, such a very high voltage, high amperage scenario where we had to actually worry about the cooling systems for cabling and whatnot. And the way he methodically approached, he never pretended that he knew everything inside out, never gave the impression that, I've done 20 of these, so this is how you do it. So it was not never faking it. So I saw how methodically he worked through it, right? Starting with the code requirements, understanding what are the different code requirements, then working with the OEMs, manufacturers, letting them know that this is the first time that we are doing it. So what are the different technologies, leveraging those connections, right? And then working closely with the clients, getting all the field data. And at the end of the day, delivered a solution which was 100% perfect, right? But he didn't start out by knowing everything, right? He figured things out and I could see him immersing himself in that learning mode, which a lot of us find uncomfortable because we feel like, okay, we've done 4 years of undergraduate engineering, we have 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And in fact, the more experience you accumulate, the generally speaking, my observation is that more hesitant people are in putting on that beginner mindset, right? Because they feel like they have to now put up an image that I'm a senior engineer, right? I have this
Right.
title to live up to, right? I'm the lead electrical engineer. I'm supervisor, or this or that. and you always want to come across as someone who always knows everything. But yeah, and I'm digressing, sidetracking a little bit, but I really, I'm impressed by the approach that you took in terms of your learning mindset. So if you can share with me your daily schedule, how did you plan your days and weeks and months out leading up to the exam?
Yeah, so it was, it was a little bit of trial and error at the beginning to just kind of figure out what worked for me. I realized that early on, I do rather go kind of slowly, like through even like the on-demand stuff, because I wanted to, watch the video and then you'd give like an example problem in the middle, and I'd want to pause it, try it on my own before I saw the solution. So I saw pretty quickly that I needed to, put in as much time as I could during the week so I'm not just completely bogged down on the weekends.
Mm,
So what I would do is I would wake up early before work and try to get like an hour of studying in before anything started, because I know, once you log on, you have your teams and everyone's messaging you. So I figured, let me get on before anyone's messaging me. I have a clear head. I have a wife, but I don't have kids. So I'm fortunate in that, to where, I was getting up, getting ready, and my priority in the morning was get ready and then start studying. So I would study pretty much every day in the morning for an hour, and then I would start work. And then I believe you mentioned you also worked in MEP, so it's definitely a very, fast, ever changing field. You don't know what you're gonna get every day. So it was a little bit of like, if I have time to know, take a structured lunch this day, I'll, eat in 5 minutes, and then I'll try and get maybe like 45 minutes of study in, or something in. If
right.
not, then I'll work till the end of the day, and then as soon as I ended the day, I switched over and I studied. I'm able to work a hybrid schedule, which was really helpful, to where during my most intensive study times, I requested to just go into the office once a week, and then normally we just go in twice a week. So not having to commute in as big of a city as I am, it helped that, the hour and a half that I would normally spend in a car, I was able to leverage studying. So I would say a normal weekday for me went, an hour in the morning, let's say, maybe half an hour at lunch, and then another hour and a half in the evening to 2 hours. And it ramped up, obviously, as I got closer. I think you spoke about even in your course and stuff, at the end, you got to just kind of see how much runway you have and what you need to attack. And in that sense, that last month, I was like, well, let me push a little bit harder now, so that way, I can be one and done.
Right.
And then I also have a really cool approach at work, to where we work half days on Fridays, because we work an extra hour every other day. So on Fridays, I'd end at noon, and then I'd be able to get like 5 or 6 hours of studying in. So during the week, because of my flexibility at my work, I was able to, get a lot of good studying in throughout the week. So then on the weekends, I had already the good foundation built, and then I would just jump into the live lecture recording, and whatnot. So I would work pretty much every single day for, the 6 months. I had a couple weddings that I was in, and I went to. So I mean, in 6 months, I probably only missed like 4 days of studying. So
That's
it's
impressive.
definitely, yeah, it's definitely a commitment, but I think it's a mindset too. I had a lot of people that have tried before tell me, you miss one day and it kind of breaks your cycle. And
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that that didn't happen, because, and the best way to do it is just to get up every day and do it all over again. So,
Yeah, of course. And that's with any habit, right? I mean, you don't want to break the streaks. Um, so this is dedication. 6 months, pretty much the same schedule, week in, week out, with only 4 days, and you had very good reasons to actually skip those 4 days. And you already work in a technical role in the MEP industry, so obviously the codes and standards, you deal with them.
yeah.
So despite that, you had to keep yourself fairly disciplined and never slacked off, basically, right? Now, in terms of, arguably, you would agree that we live in a day and age where there's no shortage of information. right?
Right.
Anything and everything related to power systems. You can find books online, you can find books in library, you can search, lectures from free courseware on different university websites and whatnot. So how did the program make it easier for you to prepare for the exam?
Yeah, so I think the program, in my eyes, it helped really build that structure of what do you need to know, and you laid out where you can find it essentially, and you find it on your modules and your live lecture and whatnot. I know you gave a lot of references to like the Red Book and whatnot in your lectures, and
IEEE, yeah.
yeah. So I I had the tools pretty much given essentially, and then it was what you needed to use. It's very easy in my eyes to feel overwhelmed to your point of like, you have access to everything.
Yeah,
What's the best thing to tackle? And you know, I, I I was trying to approach it to where I wanted to be, I don't think you could be an expert maybe on everything because this is too broad, but I wanted to be confident in each section. So I wasn't trying to, paint too large of a brushstroke, but I know through your program, I early on saw that we were diving into a lot of these topics very in depth to where I didn't think like, I don't think going to another location and finding, extra materials was going to be that much more beneficial. Maybe I could gain, 2, 3 more % of knowledge, but the 97% that I've gained should probably be sufficient because,
right.
how in depth can they get on some of these questions when there's so many topics? So,
Right.
um, not to be biased, but I mean, I really just pretty much stuck to your program. I mean, there's coworkers and friends that I had that offered up other materials or resources that they used and whatnot. And I looked at some, but I thought that you had provided so much information already that I didn't really feel the need to go outside of it.
Right. No, that's good. And it's what I tell my students is that within the program, and you probably resonate with that as well, that I take every concept in baby steps, right? First principle approach.
Right.
And I don't assume that my students, and I have a wide spectrum of students, right? A range of students. Some of them are actually pivoting to power systems. Some of them are actually mechanical engineers with zero electrical background, right? In your case as well, you don't come from a very strong power systems background, but you've done really well for yourself, learn on the job, and now pass this exam in the first attempt, testament to, your competency in the industry and knowledge. So I have a lot of students who are starting from different starting points, right? There are others who have 20 years of experience within power systems engineering. So the approach that I find that works with pretty much every single student, regardless of his or her starting point, is first principles. Okay. Even if you're super experienced, it is very refreshing to understand some of these concepts from ground up. And obviously, if you're starting from scratch, just learning about power systems engineering, then it is imperative for you to actually take this approach. Otherwise, you don't have any baseline to sort of fall back on, right? Um, and when students go through that process, initially it might seem a little bit slow, but I assume you can relate to that it builds up, especially in section 3 and section number 4. When we start going back to equivalent circuits, we talk about phasor diagrams, square root 3 becomes second nature to us. Then we build upon per unit systems and symmetrical components and fault analysis. Everything starts falling in place very nicely. And that's why in sections 1 and 2, when I go through my life training, I am kind of painfully slow, right? And those sessions are actually very, very long. Well, pretty much every session is very long. But that's the approach I take. So how effective you found that first principle based learning approach for especially the conceptual portion of the exam?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great because to your point, that not everything that was covered on the exam was, something I had experienced or worked with throughout my career or my educational background. So it was nice that, everything was laid out from a first principle. And as you get into section 3 or 4, so many of these concepts are interrelated that it was sometimes I needed to go back to, some of the first principles and review because things would,
Yeah,
get mixed up. Because especially when you're dealing with like, phasers on so many different concepts, you're like, okay, wait, am I correct or am I mixing something up here?
yeah,
And being able to go back to that first lecture or second lecture on a specific concept and rewatch it made I think all the difference because sometimes when you're going through school, I during some of the challenging parts of the course because it's not all rainbows and sunshine as you go through it. There's
for
definitely
sure.
challenging parts, but I remember like how it's very nice to have a recording that you can go back to and rewatch and slow down because when you're in college and you're going through and you're taking your notes, you're trying to take them a million miles an hour and then
Yeah,
okay, the professor's already on another problem.
yeah,
So it's definitely nice to have access to step one of a fundamental throughout your entire study process because I definitely went back to several live lectures and rewatched them. And even if there was, I felt I had a good understanding. I mean, you pick up stuff every time you watch it.
right.
And to your point, the conceptual problems on the PE exam, there's no layout of what they can ask. There's
Yeah.
so much they can ask. So you really need to be able to understand from the ground up.
Yeah, it's like what I tell my students, similar to like the behavioral portion of any interview, where they can ask, well, there's still some guidelines in interviews as to what the interviewer can ask you and what they cannot ask you. But still, those are sort of open-ended questions. They can come at you from anywhere and they can follow up, well, at least in the interview, because the two-way conversation based on the response that you are giving, they can probe you further and get to learn about you. Because the technical stuff is pretty black and white, right? And especially in the P-Power exam as well, if it's a numerical problem, as we've seen in the sample exam, it's pretty black and white. There are probably maybe a couple of ways to approach it differently, but there's only one right answer, right? When it comes to conceptual, yes, there is only one right answer, but again, there's so many different ways you can think about a conceptual problem and a lot of prerequisite. Maybe you have seen something in the field. Maybe you come across something on the project, right? So for somebody who doesn't have that background or that luxury of having spent decades in power systems engineering, how do they sort of tackle the conceptual problems? And my solution is first principles. If you understand everything from ground up, you will hopefully be able to connect the dots and get the right answer. So once again, thanks a lot, Michael. I really appreciate your time, and it was very interesting discussing your journey. And kudos to you for all the hard work for a better part of an entire year you dedicated towards this goal. And here you are having passed this exam in the first attempt, which a lot of folks sometimes take multiple attempts to get done. And you are already pretty established in your career, and I'm confident that this is going to give you a boost in your career, more respect, more acknowledgement, more recognition um, uh, within the industry and at your current employer, and will also give you the confidence to, take on bigger projects, more challenging aspects, and hopefully you find the program helpful and learn a few things. And I wish you best of luck.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate all your help along the journey. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael.
If you like this video, then please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comment section of this video below. You can find tons of success stories of my FE Electrical and PE Power students over here. And if you want to learn more about preparation of FE Electrical and Computer exam and the PE Power exam, then check out these playlists over here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next video.